what a beautiful room, and what a good-looking audience. It's new perspectives what we are going to be addressing during this meeting, and in particular, in this session. So I would like to take a very personal perspective. I'm going to be sharing with you very intimate stories and some questions that are bothering me a lot, and that have been bothering me for a while. And use those experiences and those questions to invite you to think about your own lives and to think about your role within the health system, and to start creating a wish list from a very, very personal perspective of what should be happening. Because we tend to come to events like this and adopt a third person role. So the patients are some other people. And how are we going to improve things for others? And we tend to forget that we are very much part of the society that will be affected by the decisions we make about the health system. So I want to start with two people who are very, very important to me. And they are my mother and my grandmother. They are the only two living direct ancestors I have. Everybody else is dead. And my mother developed dementia in her early 60s. And her mother, who is almost 100 years old, became her caregiver. With a team of people, she has been looking after my mother ever since. So a few years ago, my brother, who is a dentist, and I went to their home to visit them. And our plan was to take our mom away to a special facility. When we mentioned that to my grandmother, you should have seen the scene. She said, "Over my dead body. She is my baby, and it is my duty to look after her for the rest of my life. If you take her away, you'll kill me." Why would you take her away? We are fine. We are fine. And I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine." "Are you happy?" "Of course." "Do you need anything?" "No." My grandmother said, "I told you so. We are fine. Leave us alone." So my brother and I left wondering what had happened in there, really shocked, because we are health professionals. We are used to fixing problems. And we thought that they were in trouble, and that our role was to do something about it. And what we got was a big lesson that we are still processing. So I went home, more comfortable. I lived thousands of miles away. And a few months later, I found myself at one of my monthly meetings with the core members of my personal board of directors. The board is chaired by my wife, and the two main members are our two daughters. And every month I sit with them and I ask them for feedback as to how it could be a better Alex. And I said to them, "What's your recommendation?" And they said to me, "You must stay healthy." I said, "Easy, easy. I will eat better, I will exercise more, done deal." Until life hit me. I found myself in a hospital a few months later, after one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I needed a colonoscopy. I don't know how many of you have had a colonoscopy done, but anything that was inside me was flushed, including any illusion of self-importance or control. I had to drink this horrible thing, and I was playing the strong person, and no way, I had to run. And sitting on that toilet, I had tremendous opportunities to reflect about my role in life. And when I had my colonoscopy, I didn't have sedation, because that day, one of my patients was dying, and I had promised his wife, who didn't speak English, that I would be available if she needed anything. So I had my colonoscopy with my phone, my mobile phone with me. I watched the whole thing, and I felt the whole thing. And when I went to the recovery room, I was very relieved. I said, "Phew, I don't have colon cancer," okay, which was the diagnosis going in. Phew. And at that point, it hit me again. What is health? What is health? I am meant to be a health professional. I was meant to be in a healthcare facility. I am a health innovator. I'm a professor in a faculty of medicine, faculty of health. Do we really know what we mean by health? Have you thought about it? What is health? Okay. It seems that Martin Luther said that words are like children. The more attention we pay to them, the more demanding they become. And the word health is one of those. It's like beauty. Okay? Very much in the eye of the beholder. We know what health is, but when we try to define it, then we're in trouble, because there is a big gap between what we know and what we can tell. So I did what professors tend to do. I went to an etymology dictionary. Let's see where this word comes from. And I realized that very similarly to what happens in Spanish, this word is very old. And in this case, it goes back to Old English, and I would not try to pronounce it because I don't think there is anybody who knows how Old English really sounded. But what most of the etymology dictionaries seem to agree with is that this word is very, very related to being whole, to being complete, to being well. When I saw that, I said, cool. And then, shocked again, I realized that nobody had taught to me or had talked to me about being whole throughout my entire educational career. I went to university for close to 20 years. Nobody talked to me about the notion of being whole as my objective as a health professional. I was taught how to diagnose things and how to fix things, but not how to enable people to be complete. And the only time I heard the two words being well together was when I was shown the definition of health by the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization was created after the Second World War, when we humans were so ashamed of what we had done after the First World War that was meant to be the war to end all wars. And then we had the second one, which was even more vicious than the first one. So we decided to join forces as a species to ensure that we could display the best in us. So the World Health Organization was that. Let's make sure that every human, anywhere in the world, can be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. Guess what? If you want to have an organization that has health in the middle of its name, you have to define health. So this group of people, men of course, no women at that time, got together from all the member states of the United Nations, and they came up with a definition for health. And I learned this as a medical student. And I think most students of any health career have been exposed to this at some point in their lives. Yeah? So I went and revisited this definition. And I remember my professor complaining about it. And I went to the literature to see what had been done since 1948. And there was just a handful of articles talking about the definition of the World Health Organization, and all of them complaining about it. This is useless, basically, they said. This is an aspirational thing. This cannot be operationalized. And look, they used the word complete there. Who can claim to have complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Do you have complete physical, mental, and social well-being? I have a little bit of pain on my shoulder. I don't have complete physical well-being. Therefore, I am unhealthy, according to this definition. So at that time, in 1948, it was when the British Medical Journal published the clinical trial, the results of the clinical trial showing that streptomycin could cure tuberculosis. And antibiotics were becoming the thing. And for the first time in our history as a species, we humans could control the main cause of death, which were infections at the time. So instead of focusing on well-being, we decided to eliminate disease. And that's what we did throughout most of the 20th century that was left. We focused on the elimination of disease. And riding on the backs of public health developments, we achieved a lot. We doubled our life expectancy in most high-income countries by the turn of the century. But then we faced a new challenge. Now we were living long enough to develop chronic diseases and to accumulate them. And chronic diseases, by definition, are incurable. So how could we have health equals absence of disease when if we live long enough, we are going to end up with chronic conditions? Okay. So on the one hand, we cannot have complete well-being. On the other hand, if we live long enough, we are going to have diseases. So are we condemned to be unhealthy? Okay. What can we do about this? And I found myself thinking about these things in 2008, when we were celebrating the 60th birthday of the World Health Organization, and I stood up at a big meeting. The inner child in me couldn't help it. I said, yes, Dr. Jadad, I had to present a serious professor look. I said, what is health? Silence in the room. So the editor of the British Medical Journal said to me, okay, Alex, go for it. Use the journal and our blog to see if you can figure it out. So I joined forces with Laura O'Grady, who was doing her postdoctoral fellowship with me at the time. And we started a global conversation in 2008. We invited the world to join forces with us to try to reimagine the meaning of health. And this was a very interesting experience. There was no global conversation. We had more than 30 people produce new definitions. So I ended up doing more harm than good with what I thought was a clever idea. And then I was bailed out by the government of the Netherlands. I got a message saying, we have some resources and we want to bring a group of people together to try to come up with something useful. Would you come and join us? And we spent the weekend together, and then 2 more years of conversations. And we came up with what we believe is a new radical concept for health. And this made the cover of the British Medical Journal at the time in preparation for the World Assembly of the United Nations that was going to be focusing on chronic diseases. And this is the concept I would like to share with you today. We would like to propose that health be considered a reflection of the capacity of an individual or a community to adapt and self-manage when we face physical, mental, and social challenges. And you will notice 2 things here. Okay? 1, we eliminated the word disease. And 2, we are focusing on ability, our ability to manage our lives when we are facing challenges. So this changes things dramatically. And we are getting data now from all over the world, and the most beautiful set I have is from Spain. This is the Andalusian Health Survey. And they were asking people, do you have chronic diseases, and how healthy do you think you are? And on the second column, from the left, you're going to see that 75% of people with one chronic disease say my health is good, very good, or excellent. And at the far right of that graph, we'll see people with 3 or more chronic diseases. And about 30% of them saying my health is good, very good, or excellent. So now our question is, what's happening there? What makes these people feel healthy? And what is missing in the rest? And what can we do to make sure that those who are missing out get it, and those who have it maintain it? And this is very exciting because it would force us to rethink our role as health professionals, what we do within our institutions, how we allocate our resources, because now they need to be devoted to improving that capacity to adapt and self-manage. But of course, I wasn't satisfied with this because I'm self-managing and adapted to my challenges. I want more. So with my board and their influence, I've been thinking about wellness. What if we designed wellness services? What if we started to focus our attention on improving our capacity to lead a full life and to do it proactively? Because our concept of health is very reactive. You need to have a physical, a mental, or a social challenge to which you would need to adapt and which you would need to self-manage. We leave out the proactive part of our lives. I love reading. I love writing. If my capacity to read and write is maximized, my chances of living a full life will be optimal. I love asking questions. That's my verb, to question. So how can we do that? And the best example I would love to share with you today comes from the Netherlands. This is a small town by Amsterdam that is populated by over 300 people with dementia, like my mother. And they live there in houses that resemble where they lived all their lives, but with a flavor of the 1950s, which is the time they remember best. And they are free to do whatever they want. Go to the bar, have a drink, go for a hairdress and for a haircut to look pretty, go shopping. And the twist in this town is that every person working there is a health professional. So the hairdresser is a nurse, the bartender is a social worker, the clerk at the supermarket is a psychologist. If they forget what they were going to get, it doesn't matter. Okay? If they pay with the wrong amount, it doesn't matter. If they get lost, they will be escorted home. If they ask where I am, they are told. They would forget within 15 minutes. They can live a full life. They can adapt. They can self-manage. And they can proactively pursue a full life, despite the fact that they have dementia. I want that for me. But that leaves, even if we did that everywhere, even if we transformed our entire health system to make sure that our society becomes, our towns, our neighborhoods become like this, there is one big frontier that we need to cover. And I would like to finish with this one. Is that we haven't been able to change our mortality rate. And I learned this, I was reminded of this by my friend Scott Murray from the University of Edinburgh. He said, Alex, it's fascinating. The mortality rate for us is 100% in North America. And in Europe, it's also 100%. And in Asia, it's 100%. And in Australia, and in Africa, and in South America. Wow, even though we write in our articles, this intervention reduced the mortality rate by 30%. No, it didn't. It reduced the mortality rate associated with that particular disease when you are given this intervention. Dear friends, we are going to die, and sooner than we think. And in most cases, in horrible circumstances. More than 50% of us in North America or in Western Europe will die in a hospital. About 30% of us will die in a facility which is not like Dementiaville. Less than 20% of us will die at home. We don't have a clue how many of us will be able to die as most of us would wish to die in our sleep, not noticing it, after having a great time with our loved ones. We have no data as to how we die. And what I have seen is horrible. And I see it week after week after week. So when I found myself facing the system again, and I was standing there with my ass exposed, okay, stripped of my identity, I had this question come to my head that I want to share with you. Could I die healthy and happy? And what would it take for me to die healthy and happy? What would it take from us to change how we do things to ensure that we can live the longest and happiest possible lives until our last breath. And I've started to gain much more appreciation for the word happiness. I'm talking about happiness more and more, and about love more and more. We tend to exclude those from our language in the health system. And I'm starting to appreciate and admire more and more the founding fathers of the United States, who viewed happiness as a right. So I would like to leave you with an invitation today, which is the first day of the rest of our lives, to consider happiness as something that we need to protect at all costs. It may be part of health. Health may be part of happiness. I don't know and I don't care, but I want both of them. And I want to consider them sacred. Thank you very much.
So I guess if Henry David Thoreau were writing today, he wouldn't be writing about Walden Pond. He would probably be writing about colonoscopies, right? The wisdom of colonoscopy.
But no, he may have had escaped from it.
Yeah. You learn a lot. You think about a lot. I want to go back to the very beginning of your presentation. When your family member said to you, "We're fine," speaking to another family member, speaking to a doctor, what were they saying? And when people generally say, "Hey, we're fine," what it is that they're trying to communicate, either about their relationship with their own health or their expectations about the system that's trying to solve their problem?
Yeah, well, I cannot generalize to everybody, but at that particular point, what I heard was, "Back off, Alex. Don't come and interfere with what we have managed to stabilize. We are fine. We are managing our lives. We don't need intervention at this point. And we will call you if we need you. But be reactive rather than proactive, because you can do more harm than good. And we are designed to do. You see, we are programmed in the health system. I like to call it healthcare system. We don't have a health system yet anywhere. We are programmed and we are rewarded for doing rather than for not doing. So I think that we are fine means hold it, okay? Don't fire yet.
What do you think the dynamic should be for people who are delivering this message? We're fine, which could have a corollary, do something for me which actually helps, which I think helps, not what you think helps. Don't argue with me when I say I'm fine, even if it looks like I'm not fine. How can the system better enter into a collaboration?
Now you have added an element there. You said even if they don't look like they're fine. If they don't look like they're fine, and it happened to me. I worked in England for 5 years, and it was very difficult for me as a South American to deal with a stiff upper lip. Okay, I was at the pain relief unit at Oxford, and that was the dumping ground of Europe. All the most difficult cases would come there. And I had this lady, I remember it as if it was yesterday, sitting there, very proper. I said, "How are you?" I will call her Mrs. Jones. "How are you, Mrs. Jones?" "I'm fine." That's what she said to me. He said, "You cannot be fine. You're at the pain relief unit at Oxford. This is the place where the most difficult cases come." "I am fine." Yeah? I said, "Mrs. Jones, you waited to come here for about 6 months. Okay, I cannot write. I would have to write, 'You are fine,' unless you tell me what I could do for you." "I'm fine." And I noticed that she was looking at the nurse, and she was embarrassed. So I asked the nurse to leave the room. I said, "Val, would you please leave us alone?" And I said, "Mrs. Jones, I'm Colombian. Okay? We don't have this stiff upper lip. For me, it's very difficult to handle this. So I want to make a deal with you." She said, "What, doctor?" I said, "Call me Alex." I said, "I'm going to make you an honorary Colombian for the next half an hour. In Colombia, my patients complain too much. They ask for too much. They talk too much. Here, I'm struggling because people don't tell me anything. Okay? So you're going to be an honorary Colombian." She said, "Fine. Okay? Could you please go to the table?" She went to the table, and I touched her back. And she said, "Holy shit, Alex, this hurts." Okay? And I said, "Mrs. Jones, now we are talking." Okay? So now let's see what we could do together. So we need to use common sense, to use our empathy, to be able to communicate and to get off our production line mode, because we are on a treadmill and we have industrialized the health system so much that we forget to spend time sensing those clues from each other and bonding as we used to many decades ago. No, now I'm just doing my thing, becoming more and more specialized, waiting for somebody, I don't care who he or she is, to come in front of me to provide the service, and they don't care about who I am. And next. We need to pause and be urgently patient and remember that we are humans and we need to look at each other as people, and then hope to go into that space where we can communicate and connect better so we can help each other eliminate any source of unnecessary suffering.
What's the system answer to what you're talking about here? Because, I mean, you're a nice guy. Obviously, you've had some sort of surgery to remove your stiff upper lip, or maybe that's a sort of a birth issue there in Colombia. But you know, you're a great guy, but if it's simply dependent on the collective personalities of individuals who think like you do, and you're going to encounter them here and there, that's not a system answer to this industrialized health system that you're talking about. How do you generalize and scale up this empathy notion that you have personally, aside from making everyone honorary Colombians, and there would be problems with that as well. I've been to Colombia, but how do we do this as a
right
system?
Places, yeah. So it's a big challenge for all of us. So I communicated for the first time, for example, over the internet with a patient in 1991, and it was an invitation from the patient to communicate with me. It wasn't Alex who decided in his wisdom to use the internet to transcend distances. So, and even now we don't use the internet properly to communicate. So what we have started to do, and by the way, this is why I'm here. You invited me here to try to facilitate a conversation about how to do it, because we really don't know. So for the last 20 years, I have been to over 90 countries looking for hooligans, for troublemakers, people who meet 5 characteristics. They need to be generous and humble. They need to be creative. They need to be fearless, because this is not easy. They need to have a strong sense of urgency, and they need to have resources to invest, not only money, or not even money, time and networks to see how we can do it. And throughout this process, we have identified 10 regions in the world that are becoming like ecosystems to imagine and invent the health system, to reinvent it, living labs. And now there are living labs like this in every continent in the world, and we are working as members of a network, exchanging ideas and engaging in what we call radical global innovation. We are trying to go to the root of the problems, and we are trying to connect the best the world has to offer with the innovators in those enlightened local environments, and we are trying to generate as much value to society as possible. And then what we are doing is engaging the decision makers, the policy makers, you see, the funders, those who don't want to change, those who are protecting the status quo at all costs because they are afraid, in the process of transformation of the system. But we are doing it in highly controlled, contained environments, so the people who don't want to take risks feel comfortable enough to try something different. And the idea is then to use the lessons that we are generating in those contexts to multiply them. Okay? It may not work, but we are trying.
Extraordinary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.